Welcome to this presentation with the title Human-Technology Relations and the Challenges of Responsibility, Postphenomenological Impulses for a Digitalized and Globalized World. My name is Anke Redecker. I wrote my dissertation thesis on Richard Hönigswald's theoretical and practical philosophy and further approaches from New Kantianism and my habilitation thesis on education theory with focus on phenomenology and criticism. And the following presentation has got three parts. First of all, post-phenomenology and the idea of man from technology to responsibility. Here I want to start with post-digitality before I come to point number 2, global injustice, digital disadvantages, and the role of criticism. Here are several concrete scenarios where responsibility counts, and finally, from post-phenomenology to recognition theory, facing and shaping practices. How can we shape post-phenomenology responsibility? So point number 1, post-phenomenology and the idea of man. If you look at post-digitality, we can reflect chances and challenges of digitality, and we can look at human beings in ambivalent scenarios. On the one hand, they create digitality, they are actors, and they are quite mighty actors. And on the other hand, they are determined and dominated by digitality, e.g. algorithms who survey them, who control them, and also other people who survey them, who are maybe active on the same learning platform and who can see who's active there too and what the others do. And these others may feel surveyed. On the one hand, we profit from flexibility of time and place. If you look at the chances of mobile communication, mobile learning, and on the other hand, we suffer from always on and anytime, anywhere. How often do I have to check my emails, for example? And post-phenomenology can highlight human beings as part of and entangled with the world they are dealing with. And this is not new. We also have this in phenomenological approaches. If you look at Merleau-Ponty, for example. But post-phenomenological thinkers like Verbeek and Rosenberg highlight human-technology relations in digital scenarios. Post-phenomenology is a practical-oriented philosophy of technology combining phenomenological and American pragmatic philosophy to describe human-technology relations and the interconnectedness of subject and object. Experiencing subjects are subjects of perspectivity and limitation, not almighty subjects. And post-phenomenological approaches like those of Verbeek or Rosenberger can be seen in the tradition of phenomenology, as I highlighted before, mentioning Merleau-Ponty. But on the other hand, some thinkers in this direction try to overcome phenomenology and say post-phenomenology is different from phenomenology, and it is criticizing phenomenology. I don't really want to agree to that because I would see post-phenomenology as a kind of phenomenology. Post-phenomenology has gradually diverged from phenomenology, as Ritter says. With its interrelational ontology, post-phenomenology now pays attention to relations rather than intentionality. But we can ask, can we problematize relations without intentionality? If we have a critical view on relations, we have to refer to relations, and so we need intentionality. The experience of a mediated world is a typical human one. This is also stressed by post-phenomenological thinkers like Rosenberger and Verbeek. And the experiencing human being is limited but indispensable, necessary to establish critical thinking, judging, and acting of an engaged human being who reflects chances and challenges of digitality. Verbeek says post-phenomenology can be viewed as an offshoot of phenomenology that is motivated by the postmodern aversion to context-independent truth and the desire to overcome the radical separation of subject and object, but that does not result in relativism. And if it does not result in relativism, we should ask what rules of critical thinking do we want to have. Verbeek says phenomenology thus overcomes the dichotomy between subject and object, humans and world, by replacing it with a mutual interrelation. Human beings are unthinkable apart from a relation to the world which they continually experience and in which they realize their own existence. Human beings are continually engaged with the world, and this engagement precedes any judgment they may have of it. Put another way, it is impossible to speak about the world in the absence of human involvement with it. Reality in itself is unknowable, for as soon as we experience or encounter it, it becomes reality for us, a world. There exists neither human beings in themselves nor world in itself. We know this from transcendental critical approaches, but what is new is this interwovenness of human being and world. The experiencing human being is not a strong subject of knowledge and certainty. We also can stress this with Foucault. Here we have the postmodern aspect, not a Cartesian ego cogito, the Husserl critic, but restricted and limited, not a knowing subject, but a questioning subject. And our experience is pervaded by alienness, unconsciousness, and contingency, as we can highlight with Waldenfeld's phenomenology of alienation, and also with Wolfgang Welsch in transcultural context. We have ambivalences and ambiguities of the concrete subject. This subject is indispensable and uncertain, necessary and vulnerable, neither an almighty unmoved mover, nor totally passive and completely subjected. And by dealing with digitality, human beings are part of, entangled with the world they are dealing with, and they are facing agreement and alienation, freedom and contingency, distance and involvement, progress and perspectivity, responsibility and restriction. And responsible and resistant digital subjects can learn to cope creatively with post-digital challenges, but they are also socially determined. I want to highlight this in point number 2. Limited subjects are subjects of responsibility and practical reason. If we were almighty, we wouldn't need a practical reason. We wouldn't need a categorical imperative. I brought you one of its famous forms: act in such a way that you treat humanity in your own person as well as in the person of every other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means. And it would be very interesting to reflect Kant's practical philosophy in context of digitality, because we have a responsibility for critical thinking, judging, and acting, even in context of digitality and concerning questions of social justice, global justice. Another famous quotation from Kant in The Empire of Ants: everything has either a price or dignity. What has a price is something in the place of which something else is an equivalent, can also be placed. What, on the other hand, is elevated above all price, that has a dignity. That, however, which constitutes the condition under which alone something can be an end in itself, has not merely a relative worth, that is a price, but instead has an inner worth, that is dignity. So what is the dignity of human beings in digital context? Asking this, let's come to global injustice, digital disadvantages, and the role of criticism. Critical engagement is necessary to problematize global injustice, especially in digital scenarios. So human beings are not only persons, but also social subjects, and we can focus on different forms of social, cultural, and economical capital with Pierre Bourdieu. For example, we've grown up in a rich family. This is the economic capital, and others not. And maybe our parents financed our education, and it was a very good education and an expensive education, and others don't have these chances, especially in poor countries. So with the education, we have the cultural capital. With the material aspect, we have the economic capital. And we can highlight this looking at underprivileged people, their challenges and problems, suffering from social withdrawal, who can be excluded and discriminated by others, even in digital scenarios. And we can highlight this and examine this in integrated research if we combine philosophical approaches with sociology and political science, for example. And we can ask with Felicitas McGilchrist how data is entangled with shifting social, cultural, political, economic, historic, and material orderings and normalizations. There are several challenges. For example, facing the gap between the disadvantaged and privileged. Accessibility and participation is widely at risk in digital scenarios, and not only in digital scenarios. And often there are no means and chances of exercising a critical handling of digitality by judging on digital chances and challenges, especially in poor countries. What we need is a special support for the disadvantaged, especially those who do not have the needed technical devices like computers, for example. And those who feel isolated in digital scenarios. We can highlight this with July and Sofal Bagari, as well as with Sira, who problematized this in context of COVID-19 pandemic and distance learning. We need technical equipment for human beings and learning and exercising how to deal with digital communication and digital education, which is not offered everywhere and to everyone, and there may be much more points that can be highlighted. We can look at social engagement and its relation to post-phenomenology. In his interview with Kaminsky, Ida highlights that, quotation, post-phenomenologically, we are simultaneously self and other aware, hence already always both individually and socially aware, thus indirectly political. This is the concrete meaning of an engaged post-phenomenology. Highlighting its empirical direction, post-phenomenology can be seen as an applied phenomenology, as Richardson points out, and as a movement to study technology in a systematic way, as Azumichila points out, and as a theory that tries to make sense of technology in its social and cultural context. Post-phenomenology should ask how this sense and systematic approach can be established and justified. We need a power of judgment, and here we have a connection to Kant again, and this power of judgment should not be neglected in a digitalized and globalized world where local affairs can have global outcomes and vice versa. And I think it is a very important aim of education to deal sensefully and responsibly with others, the other, and oneself, in the tradition of Kant and Humboldt, but in a Kant interpretation and in a Humboldt interpretation that has gone through postmodernity. Felicitas McGilchrist says critique moves the conversation forward by raising questions and troubling those previously held assumptions and convictions, including our assumptions about what work the word critical should be doing. It also moves the conversation forward by imagining otherwise. So this is the problem of perspectivity. And if we problematize this, we can go back to ancient philosophy and highlight Platon's Socrates, who said, I know that I know nothing. I'm a questioning subject, not a knowing subject. We can look at our own biography, privileges and disadvantages. This would be dealing sensibly and responsibly with ourselves, but we can also look at privileges and disadvantages of others. This could be dealing sensibly and responsibly with others. And we can discuss power relations, their backgrounds and challenges. This could be dealing sensibly and responsibly with the other. Discourses that have established bias and injustice, especially if we look at Foucault and Hall, who problematize this, need to be reflected and transformed by human beings who can regard themselves as vulnerable and predetermined, also digitally predetermined, but also engaged actors who can at least partly shape digital discourses. People are addressed, informed by discourses, yes, but they are also actors. And what is a discourse? Here, very famous interpretation definition from Stuart Hall. A discourse is a group of statements which provide a language for talking about, i.e., a way of representing a particular kind of knowledge about a topic. When statements about a topic are made within a particular discourse, the discourse makes it possible to construct the topic in a certain way. It also limits the other ways in which the topic can be constructed. It can be dominating, and this is also the problem of perspectivity. Butler, a quotation from Butler, Judith Butler, in the same direction. Of course, this process of being formed is neither a single story nor a single sequence, because we are educated through various means and in various stages, and sometimes we have to undo our education, unlearn what we have learned. So this is a matter of education and of philosophy of education, to problematize discourses and power relations by deconstructing them. Finally, part number 3, from postphenomenology to recognition theory, facing and shaping practices. Discourses, especially those of inequality, global injustice, and discrimination, are a matter of recognition, and I want to highlight this with Axel Honneth. And what I really like in his theory is that he does not only ask how can we describe acts of recognition, he also asks how can we shape acts of recognition. Discourses about those who count as others, as natural, make the others what they are, and likewise produce categories of non-others. So the problem of othering concerning global justice and digitality is a matter of recognition. Human beings who are entangled with digitality have to recognize each other in transcultural contexts. You can highlight this with Barber and Welsh. And they have to prove chances and dangers of digital practices in global responsibility. We can also highlight post-phenomenological challenges of recognition. Verbeek says the fact that humans are what they are on the basis of their relation to the world does not imply that they are entirely determined by it, so we can do something. And rejecting relativism, post-phenomenology can put a greater emphasis on the engaged actor to stress its political and ethical relevance. We can highlight this with Langsdorff, and we can ask how can we shape practices of recognition sensefully and responsibly. And here we are at the problematization of Axel Honneth, one of the most famous thinkers of recognition theory and social philosophy, may be the most famous thinkers. And he highlights quotation different forms of recognition, starting in early childhood with love and care, followed by esteem in its many forms, and finally respect. So there are 3 stages of recognition in his theory. And we can problematize this. We can ask, are there 3 stages or 2 or 5 or 4? Should there be stages at all? But what I really like is that he asks how can we shape acts of recognition. And he argues that, quotation, we should today orient a political ethics or societal morality towards the 3 principles of recognition that regulate in our societies which legitimate expectations of recognition by other members of society can exist. Hence, it is the 3 principles of love, equality, and merit that collectively determine what ought currently to be understood by the idea of social justice. And he stresses the necessity, quote, to develop a communicative attitude, a sense for the advantages of cooperative mode of problem solving over an individualistic style of dealing with cognitive or moral challenges. So we are not individual human beings, we are single human beings and also social human beings, socially engaged, socially determined, and therefore dialogue counts. But as Metro says, even recognition is not a practice that is free from power. Here also domination can be relevant, and we have to problematize this. And we should not only describe practices of recognition, but shape them sensibly and responsibly to resume this. And critical reflection of the relations between recognition and responsibility should be an ongoing project. If you're interested in further discussions, you're welcome. Just write me an email, Anke Redecker at unibonn.de. And finally, I can say many thanks for your kind attention.